هذا حقكم وحصلتوا عليه، الله يوفقكم.
Good afternoon on this Saturday, April 19th. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai is urging lawmakers to secure quorum for next week's parliamentary session and begin voting in favor of the best presidential candidate. An explosion in the northern Lebanese city of Akkad kills 2 children and wounds 4 others. And 2 rebel car bombs target 2 central Syrian areas controlled by government forces, killing at least 10 people. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai is urging lawmakers to secure quorum for next week's parliamentary session and begin voting in favor of the best presidential candidate for the country's top Christian post. In a televised address delivering Kirki's message for Easter, he says Parliament should elect a new president whose name should gradually surface as a result of voting and as the fruit of consultations with parliamentary blocs and political parties who should also listen to the voice of the people. Rai has said Kirki, the seat of the Maronite Church, will support any candidate that the rival groups agree to. He also urged lawmakers to preserve the state and address people's issues, saying that we should seek to have a new beginning and get away from the old bad habits that already exist. He added that this new reality should call on all politicians in Lebanon, especially parliamentarians and ministers, who should be dedicated to serve the people for the public good. An explosion in the North Lebanon kills 2 children and wounds 4 others. Although the nature of the blast in Akkad was not immediately known, the national news agency says the children were playing with dynamite sticks. The 2 boys were identified as 9-year-old Muhammad Hassan Ahmad and Muhammad Sulaiman Al-Ali, aged 12. The explosion occurred when the children were playing at Ali's house in the neighborhood of Hay al-Bahr along the road leading to the Layat airport. Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnou held talks with Hezbollah's top security official to devise a plan to secure an exit for the Lebanese living in a border enclave, saying the government seeks to distance the village from the Syrian crisis. The meeting, chaired by Mashnou, brought together Hezbollah's Wafi Safa, the head of General Security, Magistral General Abbas Ibrahim, and several other Lebanese security officials. Mashnou told reporters that the meeting was aimed at drafting a political plan to help the Lebanese in the village of Tfail, which can only be reached by entering Syrian territory. He also informed the residents that they are ready to provide them with an exit from Tfail to other areas with the help of the army and security forces. This border village has grown isolated from Lebanese territory as the only accessible road to the Bekaa Valley has been cut off and seized by Syrian army soldiers as part of the regime's offensive to root out rebels in the Kalamoun region. Speaker Nabih Berri has not invited ambassadors and diplomats to attend Wednesday's parliamentary session to elect a new president, which is a reflection of his skepticism that a president would be elected on that day. He told An-Nahar newspaper, "I, more than any other official, insist that the elections be as Lebanese as possible." He revealed that no foreign intervention has been made regarding the elections, adding that no ambassador has yet spoken to him of the preference of one individual over another for the presidential elections. He did note that a new president will not necessarily be elected during the first round, even if the needed quorum is met at Parliament, and said that efforts will be exerted to ensure the success of the second round, which requires the vote of 65 lawmakers to elect a president. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja is so far the only official to submit his candidacy for the elections. Two rebel car bombs targeted 2 central Syrian areas controlled by government forces, killing at least 10 people as opposition forces fight fearlessly to hold on to territory. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said 1 car bomb killed at least 4 people in the city of Homs, in an area dominated by Alawites. Rebels in Homs have undertaken a spate of suicide car bombings targeting soldiers and civilians in government-held neighborhoods as Syrian forces launch their toughest assault yet on opposition-held areas. Rebels are already badly weakened by hundreds of defections and a blockade that caused widespread hunger and suffering. In another area, a suicide bomber in a car blew himself up at a checkpoint near the government-controlled town of Salamiyah in central Syria, killing at least 6. The observatory says the bombing near Salamiyya has also left an unknown number of civilian casualties. 4 French journalists have been found by Turkish soldiers on the border with Syria after being kidnapped by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant group in Syria last June. Nicolas Hunin, Pierre Torres, Edouard Elias and Didier François were found in Selanufra province with their hands and eyes bound. An unknown group brought the journalists to the Turkish border last night. And reacting to the developments, the French presidential office released a statement saying that French President François Hollande has learned with great relief this morning of the release of these 4 French journalists and that they are in good health and they will be arriving to France within the next few hours. The statement also said Hollande remains concerned about the fate of 2 other French nationals still held in the Sahel. Coming up next, crowds of worshippers in Jerusalem queue to get inside Christianity's most sacred shrine. Stay with us. Welcome back. Crowds of worshippers queued to get inside the Holy Sepulchre ahead of the annual Holy Fire ceremony in Jerusalem. The ceremony started with church leaders descending into the underground burial area. The church is Christianity's most sacred shrine and is believed to be the site where Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. The Holy Fire is described as a miracle that takes place on Holy Saturday annually when a flame appears from Jesus' tomb, a message that he has not forgotten his followers. In Gaza City, the tiny Christian community gathered at their church for Holy Saturday services. Some 3,000 Christians live among the Gaza Strip's 1.8 million. EU Foreign Affairs Chief Catherine Ashton is calling on Israel to reverse recent stations such as announcing new settlements in the occupied West Bank to bolster faltering peace talks. A statement from her office says Ashton viewed with great concern an Israeli decision to declare an area near the Gush Etzion settlement south of Bethlehem as state land and approval of a new Jewish settlement in the southern city of Hebron. She added that the continued demolition of Palestinian property and the confiscation of EU humanitarian aid were also worrying. Earlier this month, an EU official said Israel had demolished several EU-funded humanitarian housing shelters in a highly sensitive strip of West Bank land near Jerusalem. Ashton said that such events are not conducive to the climate of trust and cooperation needed for the current peace negotiations to succeed. Iraqi police say 2 bombs planted on a street full of shoppers in Baghdad have killed 4 people and wounded 8. They say the explosions took place in the capital's predominantly Sunni neighborhood of Dora. Later, police said a roadside bomb killed 2 soldiers on patrol and wounded 5 people in Tarmiya, about 50 kilometers north of Baghdad. Health officials have confirmed the casualty figures. All officials spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to brief reporters. Now, no one immediately claimed responsibility for the attacks, but Sunni insurgent groups have stepped up attacks across the country in hopes of undermining the Shia-led government. The uptick in violence comes as Iraqis prepare to hold a crucial parliamentary election on April 30th. In Egypt, leftist politician Hamdine Sabahi officially submitted his bid to run for the presidency, making him the second candidate for next month's election alongside former army chief Abdel Fattah Sisi, who is widely expected to win. The election is due to start on May 26 and 27th. Sabahi, who heads a political alliance called the Popular Current, was a member of parliament during ousted autocrat Hosni Mubarak's years in office and comes third in the 2012 election that was won by Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood. Sisi, who led the army overthrow of Morsi in July after mass protest against his rule, is widely expected to win the election as he is viewed by many in the country as the savior of the people who can bring stability to Egypt. Sabahi submitted the required documents to the Presidential Election Committee after gathering 3,100,000 endorsements. The required number of endorsements is 25,000. President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has won a fourth term in office with 81.53% of the vote, a victory which his chief opponent says he does not recognize. Interior Minister Tayyip Belez said Bouteflika's main rival, Ali Ben Flis, received 12.18% in an election which saw 51.78% of Algerians cast their ballots. The result comes after a 3-week election campaign that saw a spirited effort by Ben Flis and his supporters. Ben Flis, a former prime minister, criticized the election as marked by fraud on a massive scale. The figures have been described by activists and opposition politicians as inflated, although the Algerian Commission charged with supervising the election as well as African Union observers say the vote went very smoothly. Bouteflika's decision to seek a new mandate after being in power for 15 years has sparked criticism from those who question his ability to rule after suffering from a stroke last year. At least 44 of the 129 schoolgirls abducted in the northeastern Nigerian town of Chibok have been released and have reunited with their parents, according to the Borno State Education. The Education Commissioner Musa Inowakubu has confirmed the release. The schoolgirls aged between 15 and 18 were kidnapped on Monday in a mass abduction by fighters belonging to Boko Haram, a group blamed for widespread attacks that have left hundreds dead in recent months. Reports say that the military was searching for more than 85 girls still missing in the Sambiza forest, which is known to be a hiding place for Boko Haram fighters. The armed group has been on a rampage this week that started with a massive bombing attack on a busy bus station at rush hour in Abuja, the capital in the center of the city, that killed at least 75. In other world news, divers searching for survivors of a capsized South Korean ferry saw 3 bodies floating through a window of a passenger cabin, but were unable to retrieve them. This is according to the Coast Guard, which says that hours after the ship's captain was arrested, the ferry carrying 476 passengers, many of them school children, and crew capsized on the journey from the port of Incheon to the southern holiday island of Jeju. Some 174 people have been rescued and hopes are fading for those still missing, said to be around 273. The divers saw the bodies in a submerged cabin where many of the children were believed to be trapped but were unable to break the glass to retrieve them. The discovery comes amid stalled rescue efforts due to strong tides as hundreds of Navy, Coast Guard and private divers scour the site about 25 kilometers off the southwest coast of South Korea. Ukraine's Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk has pledged special status for the Russian language and a broad decentralization of power in a bid to defuse pro-Moscow protests sweeping the east of the country. In a joint TV address, Yatsenyuk and acting President Alexander Turchinov called for national unity, urging people to refrain from violence. They have said they would support constitutional change, decentralizing more power to local councils, including over their official language, a key demand of Russian speakers. Russia, meanwhile, says it is disappointed with the United States' assessment of an international deal reached in Geneva to defuse the crisis in Ukraine, saying the threat of new sanctions against Moscow by Washington was completely unacceptable. The Foreign Ministry accused in a statement U.S. officials of seeking to whitewash what it said was the use of force by Kiev's authorities against protesters in Ukraine's Russian-speaking eastern provinces. U.S. President Barack Obama has signed legislation aimed at blocking Iran's chosen ambassador to the United Nations, but says he is only treating it as guidance. The unusual legislation bars anyone from entering the U.S. as a UN representative if they have engaged in espionage or what it calls terrorist activity and still pose a threat to U.S. security. The measure is aimed at preventing Hamid Abu Talibi from entering the U.S. The Iranian government's preferred envoy is accused of involvement in the 1979 takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Obama says he shares politicians' concerns that terrorists could use diplomatic cover to enter the U.S., but he says he will treat the legislation as advisory out of concern it could interfere with his ability to receive ambassadors. Iran dismissed the decision to deny Abu Talibi a visa, saying it would take up the case directly with the United Nations. On that note, I will remind you of today's headlines. Maronite Patriarch Shada Rai urges lawmakers to secure quorum for next week's parliamentary session and begin voting in favor of the best presidential candidate. An explosion in the northern Lebanese city of Akkad kills 2 children and wounds 4 others. 2 rebel car bombs target 2 central Syrian areas controlled by government forces, killing at least 10. That's it from me and the news team here at Future TV. Have a great weekend and happy Easter to all our viewers.
هيدا حقكم وحصلتوا عليه، الله يوفقكم.